All in Sports Network. We love sports.
How's it going, everybody? Las Vegas, disappointment to say the least. A late collapse. We're out here about to go back to Texas. Had to take a day off yesterday. Lost my voice a little bit, but quite frankly, it felt like it was good for all of us to just take a deep breath, process what happened, and now let's get into it. I'll talk a little bit about the game and then a little bit about the big picture stuff after this. Quite frankly, I'm a little surprised the intensity of the reaction coming after this game. I understand the game, but in terms of some of the bigger picture questions that I've seen out there from the 12th man. But let's talk about the game real quick. 35-31, of course. USC gets the win. Last second touchdown, 8 seconds to go. They drive. They get the ball back down by 3 with 141. After Marcel Reed, by the way, a heroic play, a heroic drive in a sense to put the Aggies back up. But not enough. And A&M pays for it. Of course, the big headline was 24-7 lead, not just 24-7 lead, but tied at 7. You build it up to a 17-point advantage, and then you give it away with 21 unanswered points there in the second half. But then, as I mentioned, you have the drive right after. Go right down. Marcel Reed with the 19-yard touchdown run to put you in front before ultimately surrendering on the final drive. The one that I think killed me was the 3rd and 13 play. Like that was the stretch of all of it. I mean, even after you allow all the 17 points unanswered, or the 21 points unanswered, you give up the lead. You get the lead back. I think 17 seconds left, 3rd and 13 there at the 46-yard line. They need a field goal just to stay in the game. And then you give up a 33-yard completion. And overtime's basically inevitable at that point. And now USC's trying to go for the win. And you got lucky, too, because they got, I think, called for a delay of game after a late substitution, which I'm not saying wasn't justified. I'm just saying, sometimes I think those don't necessarily go your way. So they get down to the 1-yard line after the play, after the 3rd and 13 play, and then they get backed up even more, maybe a little bit of a chance, but can't do anything with it. Before I talk any further, I want to toss it over to Mike Elko, talking about some of the struggles defending the pass this year, and then Cassius Howell just kind of chiming in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of apprehension when the other team's going to drop back and throw the ball. I've had apprehension all season, starting with Florida. We got lucky. Starting against Missouri, we got lucky. LSU threw for 400 yards. It's been a problem all season, so it's on me, and I got to fix it. We can't play zone coverage. Every time we play zone coverage, we give up big plays, so we have no concept of space. We have no concept of zone coverage. We have no concept of what we're doing, so we have to play man-to-man all the time, and, we had some guys in there filling in some roles today that got caught in a lot of man-to-man situations, and that was hard for them. We don't understand how to play zone coverage, which is just mind-blowing to me.
We can't keep talking about it, and then when it comes down to it, I guess just shrivel up and shy away from it, and as a team, not like any individuals or anything like that, just as an overall team, we just have to, like you said, bro, just play football better. Like, it's that simple.
That Cash Towel, I mean, in particular, summed it up pretty well there, especially for a guy who's only been here for 1 year. But that's been the thing, right? I mean, we'll talk about it more, but A&M has had everything it needs to build a program where that just wouldn't be in the cards, that type of game, that type of late collapse, everything. And it just has to happen. It's as simple as that for the coaches and the players and everything else. Just a little bit more about the game. Just some quick hitters there. Marcel Reed, start with the positives. Marcel Reed, I thought, still up and down in some sense. You got to protect the ball a little bit better. But they're at 26 for 42, 292, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But ran for 54 net of 46 in the touchdown. and obviously did not have a lot of weapons available to him. Noah Thomas was still battling injury. And then you had, obviously Cyrus Allen out with the injury / transfer portal. That Trey Watson played well at times. Terry Busty, 4 receptions for 37 yards. So, but he does not have grade A receivers to throw to. And I thought, considering the circumstances, played very well. Reuben Owens in as Amari Daniels was out. 13 for 56 for Reuben Owens in his first real game of the season. Texas just kind of in very intermittently. Was happy for him to see him come back. I thought that was a pretty solid performance. You were also missing Armaj Reed Adams on the offensive line. I believe Demetrius Crownover as well. So still had to fill in some holes there. The rushing attack as a whole, between Marcel, EJ Smith actually had a pretty solid game when he played, 5 for 36. In total, 30 for 51, 151. That's pretty solid. And then 292 passing, the 2 interceptions. I thought the offense was fine. There was obviously the lull in the second half. Well, in the first half, there were, both teams kind of struggling to get into a rhythm. And then third quarter, after you score all those points, there's a little bit of a lull. But I think, needless to say, offense, I don't think was the problem in this game. I do have to say, too, I think I see some people, and this kind of leads into the discussion we're going to have, big picture, like firing Colin Klein in the middle of the game. Guys, you have to wait for these things to play out and see how they go. Even, the Oregons, the Alabamas, the Georgias of the world, like the Ohio States, they have bad either games or stretches or moments. Even the best offenses don't score every single time they touch the ball. I know that's the goal, but it's okay if they have to punt every now and then. And in the aggregate, I'm not excusing certain things, but I'm just saying, I think sometimes we get a little unrealistic in terms of what we'd expect. What I think you would have more issue with is what we're about to talk about, the defense. With not only the numbers they give up, the numbers were very similar, by the way, for both teams, in terms of raw yards gained, yards allowed. But the difference, of course, being they've lost their starting quarterback. They've lost at least their top 2 receiving options. They've lost, I think, their top running back or one of them in the portal. And yet their quarterback sort of matches your guy under all those circumstances. 295, 4 touchdowns for Jaden Mayava, 3 interceptions. So I want to give credit there. They did capitalize on some mistakes in that sense, but aside from that, 22 of 39, it's not like he's completing 70% of his passes, but just the tackling downfield has been such an issue. And you heard Coach Elko talk about it. The inability, apparently, for them to run zone coverage and then have to rely on man-to-man all the time. It's just a burden too big to bear. Jacoby Lane, who had the big third down play, 7 receptions for 127, 3 touchdowns. Mekhi Lemon, who I believe was a guy A&M was after for a while, 6 receptions for 59 yards. Kyle Ford, or 99 yards for Lemon. Kyle Ford, 59 yards in that game-winning touchdown. Look, this is one where I think A&M needs to address it somehow in the offseason. I don't know if that means really beefing up in the portal, and I know you got Julian Humphrey coming in, so that'll help. But that's one guy. I think you're probably going to have to look at some personnel changes in the coaching staff in that area some way, somehow. I don't know if that's Jay Bateman. I don't know if that's a position coach, but that unit really fell off, and you heard Elko talk about it. They maybe got lucky that it wasn't exposed in terms of wins and losses against, LSU and Missouri or something like that. But it just, the downfield tackling, the run, the yards after catch were particularly brutal this season. And I think that's something where you're going to have to go back and look and see how and why that is, and just clean things up, because ultimately that's what costs you. I do think, obviously, goes without saying, the defensive line being significantly depleted was, a game changer, of course, in the Aggies defense. Not having the 3 NFL guys, you still, you forced a sack, and I think the interception, one of them, the one from Cassius Howell, came from pressure, so that helped, but it was not like game wrecking the way it can be and the way you'd like to think it should be. So that definitely played a factor, to be fair to defense a little bit. But really, I think just this team just is still learning and needs to learn how to win games, quite simply. We saw it earlier in the year, and I'm not just saying that because they actually won games. I'm saying they actually showed to me they won those games because they knew how and were able to, go for the kill, or at least suffocate the will to fight out of the other team. But now we just don't see it. All right. That will kind of lead me into the big off-season discussion, I guess, if you will. If you haven't already, though, if you enjoy the channel, if you enjoy Aggie Talk, subscribe, help us just become part of your A&M media diet. We're going to be doing a lot in the spring with a lot of the different sports on campus, because we got a loaded spring semester athletically and academically, I'm sure, but athletically, as we saw last year. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that and help us out. I'll be honest, and I want to ask it to you like this. What were you willing to take away from this bowl game? And how willing were you to have a different perception of where this program is, where this team is, based on how this game played out? For me, I'm not saying what didn't matter, what happened, and I'm not saying that the bowl was meaningless, quote unquote, but I really did not have a lot invested in this game in terms of evaluating where things were, how things are trending for the program, massive changes here or there that need to be looked at. All that was sort of baked in for me. So I was a little surprised to see the level of, quite frankly, backlash and scorn off of this game and this loss the way I did from a lot of people on, Twitter, text tags, what have you. I'm not excusing the second half collapse and losing the game. That sucked. Okay. Don't get me wrong. That was brutal. But I just didn't. I'll put it this way. If Amari Daniels catches a 2-point conversion against Auburn and you're still playing in that game, and maybe you come out on top. So that's a few plays tweaked here or there. If that happens, if you don't give up this touchdown at the 3rd and 13, you swat it away, and 4th down, you stop them. Then you get, and I know you would have been a different bowl game, but the point is just tiny little changes that don't really change 98% of the games we saw. Tiny little tweaks were to result in 1 or 2 more wins. I don't magically feel that much better than I do right now as an A&M observer. Okay. So again, sucked. The loss sucked. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but I guess I just don't. I don't think of it like if A&M gets that stop on the last drive, we say, okay, you know what? They found a way. Like the way the narrative changes for some people on one tiny delineation here or there, especially when like a few of those plays were not like it was not like they had 24 seconds to stop them backed up at the 20-yard line. They gave them 80-yard touchdown the first play. This was within the margin of college football is weird. So I think quite frankly, I think the people saying Mike Elko should be fired or should be on the hot seat or like we really need to like take a look at that are ridiculous. Okay. And again, it's not to defend the lack of being able to figure some of the things out that has plagued the team this season, as Mike Elko said, but like we got to realize too, like after post Jimbo Fisher, the only way Mike Elko is getting fired ever during the course of Jimbo's buyout, it would have to be a disaster. 8-5, I know that sucks, and I know like that's the thing for A&M. I get it, but again, in my mind, the 9-4, 8-5 is largely irrelevant. So let's go 8-4. It sucks given how it finished, but you know the team's still going to sign a top 10 recruiting class. They've been one of the better teams in the portal. They have, I think, enough pieces to build around to be optimistic, more optimistic for next year than you probably were coming into this year, and I think this year you kind of came in thinking for me like 8-4, 9-3, but there was some variance in there that, well, maybe if this team actually isn't as good as we think, it could be closer to 6-6, 7-5. And then maybe if they really get it cooking, if Connor Wigman pans out to be like a first round prospect, like he has that kind of year, you could maybe be talking 9-3, 10-2 playoff, something like that. And we were honestly, A&M was closer to that than they were the downside, even without having Connor Wigman pan out like that. So, I think you go into next year maybe with a similar win target, if I had to guess, but more confidence in the floor of where this team is rather than, and then hoping that you could break through on the ceiling. Look, they still have to Aggie fans, to your credit, in terms of understanding the frustration, they have everything they need in terms of resource allocation. I would argue coaching staff or head coach at least, recruits, players, transfers, all that is taken care of. It does need to just come through on the football field. You know, Des Ricks had a tough season at time. Like he's a perfect embodiment, and not to like put anything on him specifically, but like he's a former 5-star. He has stretches where he makes plays. By the way, I should go without saying, Will Lee unavailable for this game against USC. That I think also played a huge factor. But and Will Lee will be back. Tyreek Chappelle will be back. But Des Ricks, like redshirt freshman 5-star, flashed, made some plays, and then got beat, you know, a handful of times throughout the season. And that cost you, but like you look at him as a redshirt freshman making some of the plays he was able to make, think I would hope he could figure it out by, you know, time he's a junior, senior and be a real impactful player. And I still feel that way. I feel, and that's, I guess, how I feel about a lot of the guys on the roster. I would say if you can get more high-end talent at the DB position, it'd be welcome. And obviously, you're going to have to replenish the D-line. The D-line, I think, is still going to be the question mark. How close can you get to where you were this year? And really, again, it's a weird thing of where A&M has not had the – with the NFL talent they've had, it hasn't always translated to the overall production, right? Like Evan Stewart would be great example. Not just what he actually did at A&M, but let's say he was still at A&M, and then he went to the draft this year, and he maybe he's a second-round pick or something. And then you look at, like, how impactful was his career at A&M? And let's say this year he had 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. Like, you're getting that out of a second-round pick. And meanwhile, other teams who have guys who are nowhere near said draft picks or comparable are getting, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 yards, 7, 8, 9 touchdowns. So stuff like that has been plaguing A&M for the longest, to where stats aren't everything, but a lot of times that production hasn't matched up with the talent, even as evaluated by NFL guys as they go into the draft. So I think you're going to need to see that gap tighten. I think the D-line, that goes with what I was going to say. With the D-line, you're losing a lot of talent, but the production, I don't think necessarily was always there in terms of the raw sack numbers or in terms of the, sometimes stopping the run was a problem. So maybe the actual what you need to replace production-wise is not insurmountable, even if the talent seems like it is. I think the linebackers are relatively okay, and obviously coming back should be better. DBs, we talked about them. Receivers, we've talked about what they've done the portal this year, the recruiting window. I think they'll have some NFL high-end guys. That's a problem, too, with this team. Has been, not just dating back to Jimbo, but, was an issue that we kind of knew about coming into the year and definitely manifested itself. That none of the receivers you have are a problem, I guess both ways, right? Like, they're not an issue to have them on the field, but they're also not a problem, like you would say, for guys who are just NFL guys. I don't know how many NFL guys A&M has on the receiving core right now. Terry Bussey maybe eventually, and Noah Thomas potentially, but right now you just have a bunch of, solid, okay guys going up against, when they go up against elite level DBs, they're not able to break through, and that breaks down the whole thing. I think same with the offensive line. Against elite fronts, they're not able to match pound for pound. And the A&M just doesn't have an area on the field where there's like a certain buzzsaw where it says, I don't care how good you are in this area, you are not going to be able to beat our guys in this unit. A&M is a lot of guys who I feel like in a lot of groups that are A&M, like A&M, we should be as good as you. We should be better, maybe even than you, but within reason. And we should win most matchups. But I just don't think A&M has the unit where you look at it, and if you're A&M, you say, our defensive line is going to wreck your offensive line. I don't care if it's the best in the country. Our offensive line is going to run your guys down into the ground. I don't care how stout your defensive front is and your linebackers. Like, don't care. Or our receivers are going to beat your DBs. I don't care who you have playing at DB. They just do not have that. And they got a lot of groups that are close, and they're closer to being that than they are disaster. But that's the jump you're going to have to start seeing if you want this team reliably to be a 9-10 win team. And so I think that's the project for Mike Elko and the Aggies heading into this year. All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I know not the most jovial breakdown for Texas A&M football history, but hey, listen, it was a weird game in Vegas. I said on our show for TV, like, they always say in Vegas, you got to quit while you're ahead. Unfortunately, though, you can't end the football game early. Otherwise, A&M would have been fine. But you had to see it through, and can't hold up. And going to be looking for answers. But I think there should be enough, at least at A&M's disposal, to be able to solve some of those things. So we'll see. But it's going to be a long wait. I'll be eager to see how things can hopefully change, go from year one to year two, the full off season in effect, Now, not only the full offseason effect, arguably that was in effect last year, but the full offseason coming off a full season in effect, and we'll see how that pays dividends in 2025. Speaking of, hope you have a happy new year in a couple days. Ben Peck, All in Aggies. Be sure to like the video if you could. Be so kind. Subscribe, help us out. We'll see you later on.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.